Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each week on Turning of the Wheel podcast. Hello and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. As you know, this is a show about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. And in that adventure, I tend to reach out and discuss lots of different modalities that I think are complementary to astrology. One of those is the Tarot. I've got a great guy coming on in a few minutes here. Before I do, I want to remind you about my newsletter. It goes out every Sunday afternoon. In there, you'll find some mundane overview of what's going on the planet with regard to the stars and the planets. And then I break it out into the individual signs beyond that. I encourage you to read your sun sign and your rising sign each week for a more accurate depiction of what's to come in your week. So as I said before, I have always been interested in all the sort of the elements that make up what I would call the esoteric arts. And in that esoteric arts is the Tarot. And I come across this gentleman the other day, and his book is called Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot. And it's a new edition. His name is Lon Milo Duquette, and it's a brand new book out on Wiser Books. I encourage you to look into it. And he's here to join us today to tell us about this fantastic reintroduction, re-glancing, re-looking at this looking backwards at this phenomenal deck of cards designed and created by Aleister Crowley. So welcome to the show today, Lon. It's great to have you on.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for thinking of me.
Yeah, so let me know. Tell me, what makes the Thoth Tarot different than any other tarot, or are there no differences?
Well, the Thoth Tarot in any given year is one of the best selling tarot decks in the world, and it's only really been published since around the early 70s, early 1970s, but it was created just prior to World War II by Aleister Crowley, the famous or infamous ceremonial magician and astrologer, by the way, and Freda Harris, who is the wife of Lord Harris, an MP in the British Parliament. And what makes it different, I guess, well, first of all, what makes it the same as any standard tarot deck is that it is just that, the same Kabbalistically based tarot deck of 22 major cards or trumps, and 4 suits with 10 pips, and only 4 court cards per suit. And in that respect, it is like the famous weight deck published by Rider for a number of years, which is the deck most people are familiar with when they see tarot. And but both of those, a deck that's organized like that, is structured along pretty strict Kabbalistic lines, and you might not think that the Hebrew Qabalah has anything to do with fortune telling and tarot readings, but in a sense, Kabbalistic thought is just a way of organizing everything in the universe so tightly that hopefully you eventually find your own place in the universe. But
so in that regard, you see it as a self-help tool, as you would with any deck of tarot cards. It's sort of a consultation oracle of sorts.
It is, and or it can be. It can be. The fact that people have used it for generations as a divinatory tool or a fortune-telling tool is sort of puts it in a in sort of a superstitious category.
Right.
But as a meditative tool, it really has more in common with Jungian psychology and the concept of universal archetypes. And but what sets the Thoth deck apart is that Crowley was very out front with the fact that the divinatory meanings of the cards and the true, more spiritual meanings of the cards are based on sort of a combination of astrological attributes assigned to each card and their place within the major landmarks of the Hebrew Qabalah. For instance, there's 36 small cards in a deck of tarot cards. That's the 2s through 10s of the pips in 4 suits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are actually assigned to the 36 signs, decans of the zodiac. So each small card represents a 10-degree period in the zodiacal year. And the 2s, 3s, 4s are assigned to the cardinal signs. The 5, 6, 7s are assigned to the fixed signs, and the 8s, 9s, 10s are assigned to the mutable signs. And therefore, when a pip comes up, you can pinpoint the 10-degree period or the approximate 10 degrees of the year that it belongs to. Mm-hmm. Then planets are also assigned to those 36 decans, or at least the planets of the ancients. Saturn.
Saturn inward, yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And those are assigned to each of the decans, starting at 0 degrees Leo, and assigned to those decans, all the way around the wheel. And so you've got a zodiac sign, you've got a decan attribute. Not only that, but you have a planet assigned to each one of those small cards. So and as we know, some planets are happy in a zodiac sign, and some planets are unhappy.
Right,
and
exactly.
Some are just sort of meh, Mm-hmm. So those are two major factors of why one of these little cards would be called love, and another small card would be called cruelty and oppression. Okay, it depends on sort of the happy partnership of the zodiac sign planet, plus one other factor which is purely Kabbalistic, and that's the major Kabbalistic meaning of the suit itself and its place on the famous Kabbalistic diagram, the tree of life, whether
right.
it's a 2 or a 3 or a 4. And just those factors put together, just sort of like a formulaic recipe, more or less gives you the classic definition of the cards that the gypsies had more or less assigned to the cards just intuitively for hundreds of years.
Interesting, yeah.
And okay, so tarot in a true sense, viewed in this Kabbalistic way, has really more to do with archetypal Jungian type psychology and the use of universal archetypes that we're all hardwired with.
And this all came out before Jung discovered this or made it relevant in his world, right?
Well, Jung was alive and kicking, but he hadn't really become a big thing yet. I'm not sure. Crowley died in 1947, and I don't recall Crowley ever even referring to Jung. But the idea that we're all hardwired with universal archetypes has always been sort of at the back of the mind of Kabbalists, because Qabalah, in a sense, deals with universal consciousness.
It's interesting that they connect so nicely. I always find that to be fascinating because Jung sort of brought a quality to the table that brought it a sense of acceptance in some way because it was more of a professional stance, whereas the esoteric arts have always been on the fringe of society. People sometimes, roll their eyes when they see this stuff. Other people believe in it very strongly. So I find that to be fascinating, especially with the connection back to the Qabalah.
Well, yes. The Myers-Briggs personality. Yes. Okay, there's 16 main things, right?
Right.
And there's, as far as a description of personalities, they're more complete, they're more subtle, and they're more complex than what we usually associate with the zodiac sun sign.
Absolutely, yes.
Or from a personality point of view, the zodiac ascendants.
Right.
And the 16 court cards of the tarot have, by tradition and by full-blown Kabbalistic scholarship, when those 16 court cards are used to represent people in the tarot reading, they match uncannily perfectly with the Myers-Briggs 16.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Was Crowley at all aware of, or was Jung aware of the tarot? And did he do any studies?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Young played what he called the tarots.
Yeah.
And I believe there's a paper by Jung.
Yeah, that rings a bell now that you mention it. Yeah, I think that's true. When you think about it, and the sort of this generalized, and for lack of a better word, sense of information is provided to you through the tarot reading. When you do a reading of using the Thoth Tarot, does it match up with where things are on the planet for the day, or for the person who's doing the reading or getting the reading?
Well, the person that's getting the reading is actually doing the real magic.
The real magic, exactly, right.
Yeah, because that's the consciousness that you're connecting with. And every tarot reading and every tarot reader is a little different. Some are just breathtakingly psychic in and of themselves, and the cards just help them focus in on whatever the dynamics of their clairvoyance is. And there's more people like me that is just an extension of the cards to let the querent discover their own answer. The idea being that if we go to the trouble and sometimes a little bit of the expense to actually reserve a tarot reading, that must mean that you really have an issue that you want to know the answer to.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, and the idea being, if you truly know the answer, if you truly know what your question is, if you truly have boiled everything down in your life at that level, where you actually have a question, then you already have the answer. The answer is already in there somewhere. And if you could just get out of your damn way long enough to see that answer that's screaming at you from all directions, if you can just get out of your way, that answer can be received in any observable phenomena.
That I believe that to be true. Yes. Yeah.
And so at least my technique of reading, and I read a lot of tarot cards over the phone, actually. I spend a great deal of time making sure we know what the question is.
Mm-hmm. Good idea. Yeah, I think that's valuable because you can't just ask a question like, "Will I get married?" or "Will I be a good student?"
Right.
You need to be more. You need to get more to the root basis of it, I imagine.
Right. Otherwise, you can just flip a coin.
Yeah.
And in a sense, in a big cosmic sense, flipping a coin works too on any yes or no question. It's just sometimes heads means yes, and sometimes heads means no. You know?
Just to make things a little more complicated.
Yeah. So, but anyway, Crowley's entry into the world of tarot really started very early in his career when he joined the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, where everyone was required to paint and create their own tarot deck, using the classic images and assigning the proper Hebrew letters to it and assigning the proper place in the Kabbalistic scheme of things. Mm-hmm. And when I say Kabbalistic, I'm not talking about esoteric Judaism,
right?
Per se. I'm talking about an organized way of thinking. The Greeks had it. The Chinese have their own Qabalah in the I Ching.
Right. Very good point. Yeah.
And as long as it's mathematically based on the elegance of a mathematical perfection of some kind, then the idea being that truth reveals itself in perfection.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And in a sense, if we're sincere about needing an answer to something, and then we bump elbows with something that is almost cosmologically perfect, something's got to give if we can just, like I say, get out of our own way.
Yeah. I find it fascinating that so many of these systems that you referred to, such as the I Ching and the Qabalah and astrology and tarot, all sort of evolved in their own vacuum of sorts, historically at least, and yet they all seem to they all point to the same truth ultimately, which I find to be really comforting in some ways, fascinating in others, logical in other ways, and doesn't that just strike you as so, cosmically pure and authentic?
Yes, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Hebrew Qabalah is more or less just based on our perception of reality. The 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which are assigned to the 22 trump cards of the tarot, are broken up into 3 mother letters and 7 double letters and 12 simple letters. And those 3 mother letters are assigned to the 3 primitive elements of fire, water, and air. The 7 double letters are assigned to the 7 ancient planetary spheres,
right,
and the 12 signs of the zodiac. But the Qabalah makes you back up even further than that, and saying the 3 mother letters refer to the number 3, which defines our dimension: up, down, right, left, and forward and back. And that those 3 mother directions create literally a cube of 6 sides.
Right.
And with the center point being this inscrutable Saturn from which everything comes and to which everything returns. And so there's your 7 right there. And the edges of that cube are assigned to the 12 signs of the zodiac. So anything, it's obliging your mind to relive, if you will, creation itself from the Big Bang expansion, where up, down, right, left, and frontward and backwards literally creates space, and any movement within that space creates time. Okay, then here's these expressions of time with the first into dualities, and then into because the 7 double letters are like war, peace, love, hate. Okay, it's dualities, and then the 12 signs of the zodiac are like a field of cosmic combat within that structure, like planets bouncing around within the belt of the zodiac. So all of that stuff that seems really dry and really abstract and really crazy that makes you just want to go turn on the television. And with the tarot, it puts it in a nice, colorful way that you can manipulate, and you can lay it out, and you can organize. I tell people sometimes the most perfect thing that you're going to do all day is to put a shuffled deck of tarot cards back in their proper order. It's like you're reordering the universe.
Is that a recommended procedure or not?
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm. I give you that recommendation for free. There's, but when you think about it, the cosmos is running perfectly right now the way it is. Everything's perfect. It's a smooth point. Godhead is this perfectly smooth point. The universe is operating absolutely perfect. And the reason that we don't perceive it as that is because we're operating with inadequate powers of perception. Okay? Right. Our suffering, our pain, our bummer, our confusion, our anxiety, all comes from the fact that we cannot, at the moment, see the big picture. And in a sense, an ordered deck of tarot cards represents the perfectly ordered universe, the way it's running right now, whether we know it or not. And that when you shuffle a deck of tarot cards and lay them out to either meditate on or get an answer to a question you may have, or just to give you a snapshot of your head at any given moment, the cards are showing you currently your defective powers of perception. This is the way you are misinterpreting the universe at the moment.
Yeah, why do you think that we have a flawed sense of perception? What do you think causes that?
Well, because we have limitations to our meat brains, mm-hmm. Okay, and the Kabbalists say people are broken up into four sections, just like the famous Kabbalistic worlds. We've got our animal soul, or the physical consciousness. Then we've got our imagination and intellect, and that's called the Ruach. And then we've got this thing right above that, which is called the soul intuition. And all of these parts, of course, are assigned to suits of the tarot. Our bodies are the discs, and our minds are the swords, and the soul intuition things is the cup. And the soul intuition, when a mother wakes up in the middle of the night, just freaks out knowing that something terrible has happened to perhaps one of her children. It's not even considered psychic phenomena. Okay, you can't even get an article published in Fate magazine with this story. It happens so often. Are you still with me?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. It happens. Okay, now if the child had been across the country at that exact same moment that the mother wakes up, the mother would have got that message. My child's in danger. Mm-hmm. And if the child would have been on the moon, the mother would have got the message instantly.
Right.
And there's no way for me to prove this, obviously, but I'm going under this considered opinion that if the child was on Alpha Centauri,
right,
4 or 6 light years from here, she wouldn't wait 6 years to get the message. She would have got the message instantly.
I see.
That's not because a signal was sent through illusionary space-time. It is because there is no place in the cosmos for that child to go that would be outside of the mother's neshama, or outside of the mother's, that part of the mother's soul.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So you and me, sitting here at different parts of the country are still sitting inside each other's neshama.
Okay.
We're it's like a giant bowl of Jello of consciousness, and we're all just little floating pieces of pineapple in it. Okay,
right.
There is no outside of ourselves, for all intent and purposes. And my rabbi that I invented says, it's all in your head. You just have no idea how big your head is.
Right.
Okay. And so the tarot, in a way, says allows you to at least artificially, with little colored pieces of cardstock, differentiate these four major sections of your being, and after a while you start to see the entire world that you perceive is also broken up into those four sections. The lowest section being the matter and energy that we perceive, like this chair I'm sitting in. It's a real chair, okay? But behind this chair was an idea for this chair, a specific idea, a blueprint of this chair that was non-material, that was in the mind of the designer of this chair. And behind this, that idea was just the idea of a place for humans to sit down. The general idea of resting your butt on something. And behind that is the huge concept of just plain rest.
Rest.
Okay?
Yeah,
rest goes into, human rest goes into specific idea of a chair going into a chair. And those are also the four suits of the tarot. The chair being discs, the idea of the chair being swords, the huge generic love, all-encompassing receptive idea of human rest in the cups, and then the idea of cosmic generic rest in the suit of wands.
Interesting. This is a fascinating discussion. We're talking today with Lon Milo Duquette, and he is the author of the Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot. And we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back to continue our discussion with him. It's fascinating on a number of levels, and it's been great to talk to you. We'll be back in about 2 minutes rather. Hang in there. I'll be right back. What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today. Or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
As the world shrinks and our barriers come down, diverse cultures are striving for harmony, balance, and peace. To ease the transition, we need to expand with color, light, and tolerance. Now, you can become a global citizen and embrace the color and clear spirit with the divine artwork of the mandala. Mandalas are a timeless artistic offering for creating unity, harmony, and peace. My name is Chris Flisher, and I've spent years creating mandalas, and they are now available online at www.turningofthewheel.com. Come and experience the world of color, form, and function with t-shirts, coffee mugs, note cards, and limited edition prints. These vibrant, lively paintings and products express optimism, oneness, and spiritual balance for all who use them. www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. And enter a world of possibility and color.
Okay, welcome back to Turning of the Wheel. My guest today is Lon Milo Duquette. He's the author of Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot, and it's an interesting subject in itself. And I'm curious, Lon, how you happened to come to this subject and be so immersed in it.
Well, I was back in the psychedelic 60s. I wanted to be a first-class Eastern mystic, and so I studied the obligatory Zen and yoga, and but I figured that after a while I discovered that being a first-class Eastern mystic was really it was a lot of work, and I was a very lazy young man, and so I was trying to find something on the equivalent of the subtlety I found in Zen and the Tao Te Ching. A Western version of that, and I really came up empty until I discovered the Sefer Yetzirah, the oldest Kabbalistic text, and that fascinated me. And I ended up taking a correspondence course from an organization called the Builders of the Adytum. That's still in existence. They still offer that correspondence course in Tarot and Qabalah, Tarot/Qabalah. Mm-hmm. And I delighted in that study, and it was wonderful. I would still recommend that course to anyone interested in tarot, especially if you want to come at it from the astrological point of view.
Right. I think it's a wonderful predictive tool. It's a wonderful illusionary tool. It helps us enlighten our views of where we are. I think it provides validation, verification for where we are and where we're going and how we're getting there.
It does if you're prepared to hear that.
That's a good point. Yeah, I can see that point.
And if you're not, it definitely has its downsides. It's so hard for me, Chris, to read for myself, to read tarot cards for myself.
I see. And the reason, what's that reason? Why is that, do you think?
I lie to myself so much. I may know the question, but if I don't like the answer, I will tell myself, I will talk myself out of what I'm actually seeing.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I could see that happening very easily. I think we all do that to an extent. We don't always like what we hear, so we try to.
I'm the worst offender too. But when I read for somebody else, it's not that I'm not caring. It's not that I'm not empathetic, but there's a level of detachment here.
Right. Which is necessary. Necessary, I think, could be detached. Yeah.
And for tarot, I just have not been able to consistently separate myself from my proclivity for self-delusion.
Right. No, I think that's a very honest and accurate reflection that you come up with. I think we all have that to an extent. It's difficult for us to read our own astrology charts. We don't always like what we see. We don't like to see the hardship. We like to find a rationale around that. But ultimately, these tools don't lie, and the truth is there for us to take it if we want it. And I think that's the real takeaway and the lesson. And I think that the detachment to which you refer is useful in that regard, because it does provide a sense of objectivity we can't get from ourselves.
Right. Yeah. And when you read for somebody else, you'll understand what has been triggered in you that makes that work. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's some people that can trigger that same mechanism when they read for themselves. But to tell you the truth, I'm so dense that I can't find that trigger when I do it for myself. When I really need a divinatory question answered, I consult the I Ching. Because, the I Ching doesn't mind hurting my feelings.
Right.
but after it hurts my feelings, it then tells me everything's going to be okay. You know?
Well, that's a nice little bonus at the end of the day to get that back there. Yeah. But it's fascinating to me when we're dealing with these tools that they are so precise and so founded in, as you mentioned earlier, mathematics. It makes me really, I think it gives us an opportunity to really think of mathematics through a new set of eyes. Now, I know that much of conventional religion is not there, but this seems to be particularly good with regard to that.
Yes. And it may seem boring, and when I discuss Qabalah with other Kabbalists, and my wife is listening, it puts her to sleep immediately, and she just doesn't go there. And so when I start talking, which is called Son of Chicken Qabalah, which should be out next year.
Interesting. Do you find that the connection between all of these esoteric sciences, do you consult more than one?
After a while, you don't differentiate between one thing and any other thing, and maybe that's not a virtue, but I really like on my tarot deck. I created a deck of tarot cards, and in all my court cards, which are fire, water of air, earth of fire and things like that. The 16 subdivisions of elements.
Right.
Are you following me?
Yep.
There? Yep. 16 of the I Ching court hexagrams are those same combination of elements. Mm-hmm. And so I just slap that hexagram right on my court card. And and when I'm reading tarot cards for other people, if the classic divinatory meaning of that court card just doesn't seem to make sense to me, I will consult the meaning of the I Ching hexagram to see if that is not where the answer lies. And to tell you the truth, many times I'll read tarot cards for people, and the answer has actually come from the I Ching.
Interesting. Well, it's a fascinating. I mean, the way they are connected always has amazed me. Going back to when I was very young, it just always amazed me that they all resonated so clearly. It does speak to some sort of a greater awareness power that we all are connected in some capacity. I find it to be very refreshing and optimistic. When you think of your own journey here, what was it that brought you to Crowley in particular? Was there anything that brought him to you?
It was the tarot. I had taken that BOTA class.
Yeah.
And along about 1971, the first edition of that Thoth Tarot was for sale down at the B. Galton Pickwick bookstore, and I bought those cards, and I said, whoa, these don't really look like the cards I'm used to, and they're very beautiful, and but they're kind of scary. They're so beautiful, they're kind of scary. And so I was still a pretty superstitious young man at the time, and I read the side of the box that said Aleister Crowley on it, and I looked up Crowley in the little cheap occult dictionary that I bought at the supermarket, and it said, "Oh, Aleister Crowley, famous Scottish Satanist," and I go, "Oh
no. One of these cards are so beautiful. The devil painted them, And so I got rid of the cards and gave them to my brother, who had Crowley's own book on the cards called The Book of Thoth. But he never read the book. He wasn't going to use the cards, but he said he'd put them together. And then a friend of mine that I really respected, an older friend of mine, said, well, no, I read Crowley's biography when I was down in South America. And no, everything you think you want to learn here with your mysticism, your Qabalah, and your magic here, this guy knew more than anybody in the entire century. And if you're really serious about this study, you're going to have to be familiar with his work. And so I eventually contacted, I read the Book of Thoth. I got that back from my brother, and I found Crowley to be absolutely, almost completely, I couldn't understand a word he said. And but what I did understand, what I could get out of it, that this man was the most brilliant a mystical writer that I've ever come in contact with. Not only that, but if I am not mistaken, this guy was really funny too.
Yeah.
And so I went to work to try to make sense of that Book of Thoth. And well, obviously, 20 years later, I wrote the commentary on that book, which is the book we're talking about here today, Understanding Crowley's Thoth Tarot. And there was an address to Crowley's magical organization, which at the time was only about 6 people still alive from the old days. I contacted them, arranged to be initiated into Crowley's magical order, the Ordo Templi Orientis, which grew from about 6 people when I joined to like the largest occult overtly magical order in the world now.
Wow. So
just in the time period I had those cards.
Yeah. When you stop and regard the tarot in general, how do you think it? Do you think the wisdom that it possesses is, as you mentioned earlier, you said that you have a question. We all have questions in our lives where we come to crossroads. We want to know which way to go. Do you find that this provides you that insight and it is accurate? I mean, when you go and you have a tarot reading done with someone who reads your cards as opposed to you reading your own, what sort of takeaway do you come from? And I know you said you don't always like the truth that's delivered, which I can understand. But how do you rationalize all that?
To tell you the truth, I don't rationalize it.
Mm-hmm.
If I rationalized it, I would be taking it out of that nepish or that neshama world that we were just talking about.
And can you describe the neshama world for us?
That's the world where the mother picks up the signal from the child who is 6 light years away. Okay, this is where all of what we would call psychic phenomena takes place. This is the world of telepathy. This is the world of intuition. This is the world of that unseen communion that we have with absolutely every other monad of existence. We see it more clearly in our attunement with plants and animals around us. But we really should be seeing it with our relationship and our attunement with all other forms of consciousness that are, or monads of consciousness, terminals of consciousness, that are our own fellow human beings. And so the neshama, which is translated soul intuition, but it's a lousy translation, but it's about the best they can come up with. The falling in love takes place in the neshama. Ecstatic communion with music or art or beauty takes place in the neshama. Can you see why it's associated with the hearts?
Yeah, I can totally see that.
And water signs and things like that.
That sort of deep, intuitive, sort of subconscious recognition of what seems to be universal almost.
Right. And now I don't want to, delve too mystically into everything, because we're you and me are sitting over here in different parts of the country, and it seems like we're having a discussion with each other, but actually we're just having a discussion with ourselves.
Oh, I see. Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense, because when we have these questions and we ask each other these questions, we're basically asking a question to get another feedback. But as you say, we really need to look no further than ourselves.
Right. And the more that we can do to bring ourselves back to that understanding that the ultimate answer is in ourselves. All these little exercises, Kabbalistic exercises, tarot exercises, astrology exercises, meditation exercises, are just tools to bring us to that point. And from the big cosmological point of view, as we raise our consciousness from one level to another, and if you don't think your consciousness is raised, just ask yourself if you would trade your places with the consciousness that you were 5 years ago. You wouldn't do it.
Wow.
I was a moron 5 years ago. Not only that, I was a moron 5 minutes ago.
Oh, interesting.
We are waking up. And every step along that Kabbalistic tree of life that goes from 10 to 1 is a waking up. And the ultimate wake up, like the Buddha says, hey, I didn't do anything, I just woke up. That's exactly what we are doing when we are making a willful, conscious attempt to raise our consciousness.
Is that possible in a world today? You think we're able to do that?
We're doing it. We're doing it right now. We're either doing a good job of it, or we're doing a poor job of it, or we're falling deeper asleep.
I see. And being aware is our ultimate goal: is to be fully present, be fully now, be fully informed. Correct?
Correct. And the ultimate wake up is waking up to the realization that we've been everyone else all along, that we've been everything else all along. And that is not megalomania, because we're all going to wake up to that. That's the pure, smooth point of consciousness that the Kabbalists have been shooting for, and that the Buddhists have been shooting for. And it's, to even use the term shooting for, implies that there's you and then there's a target. No, you're the target too.
I see. Yeah, that does make sense. In your working with this book, and your writing and getting so immersed in this subject, what is your overarching takeaway, if you had to have one? I know you're very immersed in this subject. You're very well versed. You're very knowledgeable. But what is it that sort of resonates with you, if you had to summarize it?
Well, the summary, I almost gave it to you right there.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Is the fact that I'm like when you wake up in the morning, you don't have to really go out of your way or perform any technique to instantly move your consciousness from the dream unconscious sleep state to the getting up and brushing your teeth. It just happens.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you say you're having an uncomfortable or anxiety moment in a dream, and you figure out, oh, gee, this is just a dream. I'm going to move my arm or leg or sneeze or something, and I'm going to wake up. Waking up is truly that easy. And if there's a takeaway, it's the takeaway that my own existence is only justified by the fact that there must be something in the present dream that I am in. There's something that still needs to be done that only I can do.
I see.
And I wouldn't even be here if there wasn't that unfinished job in this current dream. Okay? And so in a sense, that's incredibly empowering that I wouldn't even be thinking. I wouldn't even be here. I wouldn't even be self-conscious if there still wasn't a job that this dream Lon still needs to do that only I can do. And every monad of consciousness in the planet, either a sentient being or an inanimate object, has that quest. It wouldn't even be unless it is fulfilling the function in the big picture. And so, and in a sense, that's, I can't think of things as a takeaway or a big aha moment, because the second it happens, I'm off on another quest for the next wake up.
I see.
And the next wake up.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's very interesting sort of, I know it wasn't meant to be a summary and you probably can't do it, but it certainly served well to sort of clarify where you're ahead of it. And I understand what you're saying. Makes great sense. We've run out of time, unfortunately. There's a lot more to talk about. Maybe we'll get you back on some other time. The name of the book is Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot by Lon Milo Duquette. It's a brand new book. It's out on Wiser Books. And you can get it through Amazon and all that. Again, it's called Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot by Lon Milo Duquette. I want to thank you, Lon, for coming on today. And
thanks, Chris, for letting me. I monopolized the conversation.
No, that's okay. I wanted to understand where you're coming from and how you got here, and I find that interesting. And I may even decide to take you up on I may decide to call you up and do a reading on my own just to see where you come down with that, because I am curious. You've piqued my interest. But in the meantime, I want to thank you again for coming on today. Lon Milo Duquette is the author of Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot. So, Lon, thanks so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Chris.
Okay, very good.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.turningofthewheel.com. That's www.turningofthewheel.com. Or you can call me at 978-393-1036. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.